Alright, everyone give it up for day 74 of lockdown. I would like to take this moment to congratulate the network service Hulu for finally playing an ad every 5 minutes that was so obnoxious my wife and I have upgraded to premium, because I, for one, am extremely sick of celebrities staying at their home in outfits likely worth more than what both my wife and I combined pull in a month, telling me that I need to eat out and spend more money. Much like everything else that is wrong in the North Orange County, California region, I am blaming this on Disney. You know what has been my one light in this miserable abyss we call a quarantine lately? Kenshi. Lately, I've been spending a lot of time playing Kenshi. Kenshi is a game that makes me feel the same way that I felt after a teenage me fished the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion out of a discount bin and proceeded to get lost in it for 100 hours at a time. Let's be real here. We've all seen the Seth and Wilberger videos about Kenshi, but aside from Naruto running drugs and beep, what exactly is Kenshi? Well, it's a massive open-world RPG with a dynamic world, faction system, economy, combat that harms characters' limbs and blood pool instead of just doing a number crunch at a total health pool, and beep. That doesn't really do it justice though, so let me tell you about my first experience in Kenshi. I rolled a lone wanderer type with not much but a rusty metal club to my name, and followed the advice of that one video and tried sneaking into the ninja tower to use their training equipment and was like, yeah, this is really lame, I'm not getting the levels I need, so let's just go out into the real world. So I did. After a bit of wandering along the road, I found a city where I mistook the local law enforcement headquarters for a public place and got arrested by the Shek people before being tossed out of their tower. I'll have to train myself against real-world threats. I explored some more and found some cool ruins where I got some slightly better gear that people just abandoned for some reason, and some stuff to sell to the barkeep for a morsel of food. However, on my way back to the city, I slightly strayed off the path to get back into Squin, and a single stray dog chased me down, beat me unconscious, and broke both of my legs. A single stray animal had beat me within an inch of my friggin' life. When I came to and was sure that the bone dog had gotten bored and wandered off, I began to drag myself by my arms back into the city gates, being careful to avoid anyone around me, as my legs were so damn broken that dropping a recently washed butter knife near me would cut them clean off. I made to the city where the guards at the gate were like, I don't care if you're about to die, we're searching your bags right now. And of course they didn't find any drugs on me. Acting as quickly as I could as I was pretty much bleeding out in the store, I traded my scavenged supplies for some medical supplies and a backpack, and once I bandaged myself up, dragged my broken but now not bleeding legs over to the hotel, where I learned that I didn't have enough money for a bed, so I had to hawk my crossbow for a scrap of food and the ability to sleep in a bed for a couple days until my legs looked like how legs are supposed to look. And this had me saying, once I finally got out of bed, holy crap, this game is hardcore! I love it! Within a month of first starting up Kenshi, I logged over 100 hours to my first major playthrough. You can really get lost in this game, both figuratively and literally. The map is huge, and there's no fast travel of any kind. And Kenshi is not a place that gives you free passes when you mess up. There's also so much to explore and discover, and without getting too much into the lore, since one of the best parts of this game is learning bits and pieces as you travel the ruins, Kenshi is a world that takes place in a post-apocalyptic society, as in, the first society collapsed in a spectacular fashion, they eventually rebuilt, but then that society collapsed in a spectacular fashion, leaving you where you are now. A bit of advice to anyone that wants to pick this up is seek out the unique companion Burn the Skeleton as soon as you're able to brave the Wasteland region. He's somewhere over here. Burn was around for most of that happening. I definitely recommend picking up Kenshi to help pass all those lockdown hours if you haven't already, and I'll include a link to the Humble store where you can get it and help support the channel through your purchase. Now, I could tell you about all the cool things in Kenshi, but I think it'll be more interesting if I do that through my own experiences in my own playthrough rather than talk about things in general terms. Kenshi is all about the experiences you'll have in-game, and yours will likely be a lot different than mine, so there's no need to worry about any major spoilers here. So like I mentioned earlier, I picked the Lone Wanderer start since it seemed like the best way to go about things for your first go-round. You can pick easier starts, like starting with 5 dudes who are going to go straight to making a city or being a wealthy merchant. or you could pick a harder start, like rock bottom when you start with missing limbs. But I went for the vanilla experience the first time around. I got dropped off in the mostly destroyed city of the hub, which I have no idea what it's the hub of, and I read a guide saying that I should immediately go and start a bar fight by talking trash to this one guy so I could take his gear after the guards beat him up, but he wasn't in a fighting mood. So I did the next thing the guide said and went to the Shinobi Thief Tower, which also we already know how that went. Discovered the city of Squin with the Shek people, got arrested, then I went out and did that scavenging, got mauled by a random dog, and you're caught up. I eventually got back on my feet and I managed to recruit my first traveling companion, a Shek lady named Soto. We have a good time traveling a bit before a random skin spider wanders into us and teaches me the value of kiting and that exploring is for people that can defend themselves. And we are not people that can presently defend ourselves. We head back to Squin, meet Ruka, the hornless Shek, who joins us for free, and I enter the Hell Hours. The Hell Hours are what I call everything after the 5th hour and before 20 or so hours into the game, once the initial exploration and learning about Kenshi is done, and now you're on the quest to learn the hard way that you are at the bottom of the food chain. In your current state, literally everyone is better than you, and they will be taking advantage of that. Pretty much every place in Kenshi is not a place you should be wandering into at your level, but the only way you're ever going to make any progress in this game is if you wander into those places and get your teeth kicked in. Let me introduce you to all the people that will be ruining your day. The first thing that's going to be wiping out your fledgling squad would be the Starving Bandits faction, or the Hungry Boys, as I began to call them. They're a faction of roving bandits that have little more than rags on them or no armor whatsoever, and are armed with rusted junk clubs at best. As their name implies, they're almost always starving, meaning that they have a pretty heavy debuff on all their stats at all times. I first came across them in Shek territory, where a band of 5 or 6 of them who rushed me for what little scraps of food I had, which my team was barely able to escape with their lives, but our food was now in some guy's stomach. Not even a day later, I realized what I had fought was a small splinter group of the main forces of the Hungry Boys. As I found out trying to set myself up in Holy Nation territory, Hungry Boys tend to travel in packs of 30 and will not stop until they have snacked on everything you own or they are all dead. My little squad of 3 rookies had no hope of fighting them off, and we had to regularly run and hide in some Holy Nation ruins whenever we saw them coming. Next group of people that you're going to have to deal with are ninjas. Black Dragon ninjas, Swamp ninjas, Cloud ninjas, Floatsome ninjas, depending on your faction allegiance, and pretty much anything else that has a katana-style weapon. I first met the ninjas when I was exploring in the swamplands, only to find that after looking away for a moment, my whole squad had been wiped out, and the Swamp ninjas hadn't even bothered to take anything after looting me. I'd meet the Black Dragon ninjas later on when they raided my base and decided that they really liked the place, so they just kicked me out and take it. They're low level, but they swarm like the Hungry Boys and have passable gear, full bellies, so that makes them a much larger threat. These guys are programmed to take literally all of your food, even if they aren't hungry right now, so make sure you have a strong gate. Like, it's so bad that one of the more popular mods on Kenshi is disabling those guys' hunger stat. You can't bargain with these guys, and they tend to attack a lot once you have a base built. So don't go building a base in their territory unless you're ready for a big boy battle on a weekly basis. Seriously, for a while I didn't even bother to mine iron at my base because so many Black Dragon ninjas would attack me that I could just use all their scrap gear as a reliable source of iron ore. Next we have the Dust Bandits and other bandit types. They live along major roads, and usually they have the option of allowing you to pay them off if you're rich enough. They'll raid your town too, but they'll also give you the option to pay them off at the gate to avoid conflict. I learned it's cheaper to contract the Mercenaries Guild though, and after a minute, you're not going to be bargaining with these guys. The Dust Bandits made me miserable during my first leg of my adventure, as they're pretty much everywhere and where you're safely able to travel, and once they have a beat on you, they're gonna follow you almost indefinitely. Lucky for you, that means that they'll chase you into towns where the city guard will deal with them. A lot of people find that to be a legitimate strategy, that you just let them follow you into a city, have the guards kill the bandits, and then you take all their gear and sell it. You'll also have to deal with the Holy Nation and slavers in the early game if you've got any sort of non-white, non-male members of your party. They don't like you. and they will enslave you on the street if you don't talk to them with your male Greenlander party members who happen to be holding their Bible. They'll carry off all your Shek and Hiver party members to be cleansed in prison work camps, and they'll regularly raid your base if you're in their territory and they find out that minorities are living in your house. Slavers are the same business, except they'll just enslave all of your party if they deem you to be weak enough for them to take you in a fight, and then they'll sell you to the United Cities. The game doesn't end when you're enslaved, by the way. The game ends when literally all your party members are dead. Lastly, we've got all of Mother Nature. And unnature, I guess, too. Pretty much anything that can survive in the wild is strong enough to make short work of you right now. That bone dog that mauls you in early game? They travel in packs, and they will wipe out your party. Then we've got the skin spiders, which will literally eat you if they come up on you in groups of more than 2. There's gorillas that just beat the crap out of you, and those things in the desert, and beak things. Beak things are everywhere, and if there's one beak thing nearby, there's probably 3 or 4 more that will show up and gang up on you by the time you've managed to get the first one down. I first met beak things when I wandered too close to the crater and like 4 or 5 of them rushed me. Beak things are big. Beak things are nasty. Beak things do cutting damage, so they can and will remove your limbs. Beak things will rush you because you look like a snack, literally. And they're all tougher than you can handle until much later in the game when you've got your squad all geared up. They'll just start eating you once they get you down too, so have fun with that. Their nests tend to be pretty large, and they have pretty wide territories outside of their nest. And on top of the beak things, if that wasn't bad enough, we've got all the miscellaneous stuff like those weird bug things in the desert, the cannibals, the fogmen, skin bandits, and mechanical spiders, along with listless skeleton people that no longer have their sentience. Just the best way to sum it up is that basically everywhere is not a safe place for you and you're going to get wrecked. Here's a nice little diagram of places that you should not go if you are a low-level squad. So since I was now well aware that exploring was not a good idea for my little 3-man band, I decided to try and make a base for my team to train in to get better at fighting. Here's a good rule of thumb for putting down roots in Kenshi. If you are slightly unsure if you're ready to put down roots, you are nowhere near ready. Making my little hovel with some sleeping bags and a research bench put me in the crosshairs of literally everyone in the world. Now that I had an address, all the bandits, hungry boys, and the Holy Nation knew where to go if they felt like shaking me down. Within a day of me setting up my base, the bandits were at my door demanding money, and that was far more than I had. Early on, you get the option to stab their leader in the throat, and they'll all run away from you, buying you a day, until they come back with twice as many dudes, and they're no longer in the mood for negotiation. Then the hungry boys notice that there's a new homestead out in the wilderness that maybe the people living in have some food. We didn't. And then they'll start bum rushing you 50 at a time. And just when it didn't seem possible for things to get worse, I realized that I had built on the Holy Nation's territory and that they were coming to enforce Prayer Day. I'm sure you've watched the other videos and know what Prayer Day is, but something I noticed that wasn't covered in those videos, aside from the stupid helicopter from the municipal airport, is that when the Holy Nation comes, if you answer the door with literally anyone who is not a male Greenlander holding one of their Bibles, they'll consider your settlement heretical, and they'll bring the Inquisition the next time around to burn your city to the ground. At this point, we had gotten fairly used to evacuating the city whenever anyone looked like they were coming for us, so we tried to build some walls that made a diamond link fence seem like a fortress, but even the hungry boys were literally able to knock down our walls instead of going through the gate and search up some snacks that we didn't have. We didn't have a chance against the Holy Nation Inquisition. Eventually, after loading a lot of saves, I realized that enough was enough and I wasn't ready to put down roots yet, so we quickly finished whatever research we were able to do. We ran out through a homemade back door, leaving the remains of our misguided base to some other fool. It was at this point that I realized something very important about Kenshi and your place in it. You are not the chosen one. You're not the Dragonborn, or a prisoner whose presence was foreseen in the Emperor's dreams. You're not a courier who's able to cheat death. You're not a renowned warrior. You are nobody, and if you want to continue being nobody for long enough to become somebody, you'd better keep a low profile. You can go places if you really want to, but you haven't earned the right to fast forward through long stretches of travel yet, because you need to keep an eye out on the road for anyone else who might attack you. You'll eventually get to the point where traveling is no longer a dangerous gambit, but before that, you're gonna have to put in a lot of work and take a lot of beatings in order to get that toughness stat up. So at this point, I was about 20 hours in and starting to get the hang of things. I knew what I shouldn't attempt to do right now, and I knew what I should stay away from, and most importantly, I knew where I needed to go and what I needed to get. Money, friends, and science. I should focus on that last one later on though. Nearly every recruit in Kenshi costs money, save for a few special circumstances, and you need a way to reliably procure cash so that you can get people onto your side. I realized that some of the other guides were right, and I needed to think like a twitchy crackhead vagrant and start stripping things for copper. Lucky for me, there were a pair of seams with copper and iron a short walk away from the city of Squin. I should mention that mining is one of the easiest ways to get money in the early game because you don't need any special tools or skills to do it, and it helps that you can train your squad's strength hauling all the heavy ore to the traders. I set myself up a little bitty camp with a fireplace and some sleeping bags right in front of the ore seams and started hauling and mining all the ore I could to get myself a chunk of change. Lucky for me, there were even occasionally herds of goats that wandered right by the ore seams, which served as a wonderful source of food between town runs. After a good minute of trading my stripped copper for cash, I had enough money to get some road provisions and make a few new friends. The boys now consisted of me, Soto, Ruka, Rain the Giant, Hotlongs, Oron, Kang, Meow, and a pack beast. Also, we got a dog. Don't get too attached to the dog though, as he wanders off in search of arms to nibble on and never comes back. Maybe he found a nice farm upstate in the United Cities. What matters now is that we've got enough money to hire a crew, we've got enough money to feed the crew, and give them the armor that might actually negate some damage. It takes a bit to get the newbies up to the same level of not quite defenseless that myself, Soto, and Ruka are at, but things are certainly easier now. With the pack beast, we can carry a lot more scavenged loot, and also that means that we aren't weighed down during fights. After a while, we start not being everyone's punching bag. Fights with normal-sized mobs of hungry boys are tough, but we can win. And sometimes we can even take on the dust bandits in smaller groups. And we should still stay the hell away from any Holy Nation patrols, as those dudes are tough. And they really don't like the idea of me calling Shek my friends. We'll deal with them later though. For now, it's time to explore the safer parts of the world and meet the major players in the world of Kenshi. Over in the starting area is the Shek Kingdom, with Admag as its capital. The Shek presently only have 2 major cities and a lot of ruins, for reasons that you can find out as you play, but they also have several splinter factions that like to pick fights with you. They're okay though. Even if they outwardly dislike humans, they'll still tolerate us so long as we don't try anything stupid, and best of all, they won't enslave us for being different. Just east of them is the Holy Nation. They'll be the coolest, friendliest group of dudes to you ever, so long as you're a Greenlander male character. If you have anyone in your party that doesn't fit that description, they don't like you, and they assume that you're the slaves of the Greenlander male. If I don't say these guys are my slaves and say, no, these are my friends who I did pay money to recruit, who do whatever I tell them to do. And okay, Ruka joined up for free and Soto just needed someone to buy out her contract, but the point is, no one here owns anyone else, but Holy Nation don't care. They see that as heresy. They'll enslave all of you for heresy. By the way, they consider all forms of science books and robotics to be completely illegal, and you'll be in big trouble if you're carrying any educational heresy into their cities, or they'll just attack on sight if they see a skeleton or somebody with cybernetics. Further east and to the south of them is the United Cities. They're technically a free nation where all people are equal so long as you're not a slave, and everything is great in the UC, mostly because their economy is propped up by slave labor, but hey, you can get some good stuff for cheap out here. Everything is great except for the slave part, but me and my new friend Tin Fist are gonna be doing something about that later on. Lastly, we've got everyone else. The hives that mostly keep to themselves, but if you come into their territory or mess with their queen, you're gonna be screwed fast. Then we've got the flotsam ninjas and Holy Nation outlaws, people who follow Okron but dislike the whole Holy Nation fringe extreme stuff. Then they've also got the Trader Guild, the Mercenaries Guild, and the Tech Hunters, who all do as their name implies, and other such places such as the free cities of Mongrel and Shark, which is where you go if you don't want to be found or do something illegal. Mongrel is also where you get the most precious character in the game. There's a good deal of minor factions here that we're leaving out, but you'll eventually find all of them. There's a lot to go over here, and we'd be here all day if we list them all. Our grand tour of everywhere that is reasonably safe to go ended up with a stop back at the old homestead, which is now a ruin, making it in slightly worse condition than we had left it. Now that there's enough of us to hold the fort, literally, We used some science books we found from an earlier trip into the swamp to do a little bit of basic research so that our next base can feel like a real home that isn't just a shack with a big sign over it saying, "A bunch of weak idiots live here and you can take them in a fight." We finish up all the research that we're capable, dismantle the last of the base for parts, and strike out in search of a better spot to build our home. So it's time to put down roots. For real this time. We've got enough people to where we can fend off most attacks so long as we don't pick a fight with anyone serious, and that also means we have enough people to do some basic industry. After a few tries, I found this awesome spot that was perfect for building our new home. It was in the border zone, which meant that none of the major factions picked on you, and it was in a fairly secluded spot that bought you an extra bit of time between raids since it takes the AI a while to negotiate the treacherous path in order to get to the mountain we're at the top of. So, as I mentioned, we're now capable of fending off most lesser attacks thanks to our research efforts in greater numbers, and we now have walls that were strong enough to withstand people leaning on them for more than 5 minutes, and we could mount crossbows on these walls if we knew how to make them. Most Dust Bandit and Hungry Boy incursions were dealt with reasonably fast, but we were a short distance from the Black Dragon Ninja's base of operations, so they came to hassle us like every week. We got used to their tactics though, and eventually their gear became a good source of iron. Our baby base had power and even some rudimentary industry, even if all the stuff we had was so low tech it didn't even require power. But we had a single big issue. We couldn't make our own food. Things get bad real fast if you don't have enough stuff for everyone to snack on, and things will get to that point pretty fast now that your squad can no longer be counted on fingers alone. Thankfully, loading up our pack beast with all our excess building materials that we make and heading off to Squin to trade was usually enough to where everyone would get enough food for a full belly, at least for the next few days. There were some real close calls with starvation though, and some people did need to be carried to a food source on multiple occasions. Learning how to farm and then getting the stuff we need to produce our own quickly became a major goal. When we weren't fending off hordes of Black Dragon Ninjas and the stray Dust Bandits, or nearly dying in a famine that we brought on ourselves from our lack of agriculture, everything was centered on getting some R&D in. Any leftover cash from food runs was spent on books, and my main character was almost always at the research bench trying to figure out how to make this little base work. How do we grow our food? How do we prepare the food? Can we make better gear on our own? What about those cool crossbow mounts we see in all the cities? We're gonna need some more of those if these ancient science books are worth anything. And also, we're gonna eventually have to find something called an AI core. I wonder where you get those. Along the way, we started learning some hard lessons about building and maintaining a base that I'll impart to you. For one, it's tempting to make your base's entry walls flat or in a convex shape so that you'll have more land inside of your walls. Don't do this, especially if you have those mounted crossbows. Mounted crossbows work off a 180-degree line of sight that will fire an actual projectile to do damage instead of a hit scan. The cone of accuracy for said projectiles is based on the mounted crossbow skill of the person who's operating the turret. Since bad guys will almost always bum rush your gate when attacking, that means that if your gate is flush with or sticking out from your outer wall, your mounted crossbowmen are going to have to aim in the direction that has all the other gunners very close to, or if not, completely in the line of sight of the other gunners further closer to the gate. Even at a low level with a basic mounted crossbow, a stray bolt straight through the head is more than enough to accidentally one-shot your gunners. Make sure that your outer walls are in a concave formation where all the mounted crossbowmen have a clear line of sight to the gate without getting any of the other gunners in their crosshairs, or else you're not going to have any city defenders that make it to a high enough skill level to be of any use in defending your city. Oh, and don't buy any pack animals or other animals that you don't intend to take with you at all times, because you can't put food storage outdoors and animal characters can't go indoors. So they're just going to starve to death if you leave them to their own devices for too long. All of their humanoid followers, though, know how to go inside a building and get something to eat. My base was now able to defend most attacks with our new crossbows, but we were nowhere near self-sufficient yet. Food was still an issue, and we couldn't yet make our own supplies for expanding base operations. One solution to this is to be on the hunt whenever possible. Our fledgling trade route often had packs of goats and even Garu running around in them, and even if the Garu might be a pretty tough fight, it saves you a ton of money trying to take down their packs and grabbing their meat, instead of spending all your hard-earned Catan credits from making all those building materials on food just to keep you alive. The whole point of building a base was to start thriving instead of just barely surviving. And as far as I can tell, packs of wild animals just keep respawning, so as long as you don't wipe out the nest, This is sustainable for the time being. Now that we have figured out where to get the food without breaking the bank, we started having a good chunk of change left over from merchant runs to start bringing in more people to take care of the base. And now, the original squad was mostly reformed, and we have people who are designated to stay at home and work on industry. Those farms aren't going to get themselves up and running. They can even afford to fend off most attacks without our main squad being there, so we don't have to worry about wandering too far from home and can now go get more stuff. You can also check the faction tab on your menu to see when people are going to come to your base and try to fight you, because apparently the Black Dragon Ninja Clan is very good at calendaring their raids. Having designated people to do jobs and also go out to trade or explore also meant that these things get done faster, as my away team doesn't need to help out with basic chores around the homestead, and they can go run out farther, and we don't have to worry about workers back home. Now that we've got the means to go further out, the squad is really starting to learn the rules of the wilderness. For instance, always loot animals, even if they don't have anything you want. Just leave the stuff on the ground if you've got no use for it. Looting non-humanoids such as beak things or mechanical spiders of any of their parts, say leather or compressors or meat, will kill them instantly, meaning you won't have to fight them again in a few minutes when they come to, as it's kind of hard to get back up after being knocked down when somebody looted you of your organs. It's also very smart to have everyone follow whoever has the lowest athletic skill, as otherwise your team forms a large, unorganized train of stragglers that get further and further spread apart. It's also good to pack more food than you think you're going to need, as it eventually will disappear, freeing up your bag space, and it's likely that you'll find new things to investigate while you're out exploring, meaning that you're going to be out for longer than you thought. Oh, and don't go near anything that has the word ash or dead in it. So the farms at home are starting to look like they might actually be able to feed us, and the away group no longer has to run and hide whenever literally anyone else is on the road. There's a lot of stuff that we still can't do yet, like make good weapons and armor or build defenses that can kill someone before they break down our gate. And half the time, we can't even make the resources we would need to make those things in the first place, so we have to go out and spend our money on materials instead of, nicer gear. It all keeps coming back to us needing those ancient science books, engineering documents, and AI cores. You can't really get too far in Kenshi without doing some serious expeditions into abandoned science facilities, and while ancient libraries will have a few ancient science books, and maybe won't be too dangerous for you to go to depending on which one you choose to loot, you're going to need to get the engineering workshops and science towers that are crawling with security drones if you ever want to make anything nicer than a thin wall with some low-grade weapons on it. This means mounting serious expeditions that involve bringing a small base's worth of camping supplies, hiring mercenaries, and brushing off those vanilla WoW dungeon pulling skills, because there's no way you're going to be taking on more than one security spider at a time. It's time to explore the wild, wild wasteland. So at this point, the base is now totally okay to be left alone, and conveniently, there's a full squadron of mercs a short walk away from our home that are posted up in the hub's bar that we can hire for 8 days at a time to watch over our farms, which means that even the Black Dragon boys aren't something we need to worry about for a good minute. It's time to bulk up the main squad and start heading out to places that don't even have towns to restock in so we can get the good science. The first thing you gotta do for these expeditions to not be a total crapshoot is start buying up all the ancient maps you can find. They're usually sold at travel goods stores where you buy your backpacks and stuff, and when you use an ancient military document or a tech hunter map, it'll highlight a newly discovered location with a green box that's enough to get a start in moving in the direction that's gonna be fruitful. It's good to buy as many of these as you can, since it's likely that there's going to be at least 2 maps on offer that reveal locations that are close to one another, and there are likely other maps that you might find at these locations that will either tell you of more places to get the science you need, or at least you can sell them for a pretty decent price and make your investment on the maps back. You'll also start going to new places where you can make new friends, so you'll have additional bodies to carry things, or at least some new workers to send home so that each person only has to have one job. These ancient science labs are tough. They take a long time to get to, they're often in territory that was already dangerous to begin with, and the security spiders are some of the toughest enemies in the game, and they can very easily remove several people's limbs at once if you aren't careful, since their main attack is an area of effect cutting attack. There's no shame in leaving a science tower and coming back later if you discover upon approaching it that there are too many defensive spiders on the first floor, or too many grouped together to safely pull them. I know I did. Working your way up to the top of these towers is hard. Even with a full squad of mercenaries backing you up, and a sizable squad of my own, we often had to stop and rest on sleeping bags between fights, since even 1 or 2 mechanical spiders was more than enough to cripple the bulk of our party. Sometimes it would take in-game days to get all the way to the top floor, and by then the mercenaries' contracts were up, so we were on our own. But there was no point in trying to rehire these guys immediately after it expired, since either a number of them were outright dead or they were crippled, beyond the point of being useful. But once we finally got to the top of those towers, whoa mama, there's a ton of science up there, and enough loot to finance at least 2 more expeditions like this one, base security included. We also got our hands on a couple of those AI cores, which means we can start doing some serious research now. Things are starting to get better thanks to the science we found on the first couple runs. We can now make our own cloth through a hydroponic hemp farm, and between that, our ample iron supplies from all those Black Dragon ninjas, and us having more animal hides than we know what to do with, we have all the things we need to start manufacturing our own gear. Of course it's crap right now though, but I'll leave the craftsmen to their own devices and come back when they can make something better than shoddy grade. We also have enough farmland to make enough food for everyone to eat, and then maybe have some wheat left over to make booze. Maybe we can sell that. What really was a big score though, were the maps that have all the locations of all the other science facilities and the know-how for taking them on. Thanks to all the loot we found, we have enough cash to recruit some more people for expeditions and maybe bring some more veterans along that were normally just working the farm and send the newbies we find to replace their jobs back at home. Science labs are now much easier to take. There was this one where it might have been impossible otherwise, seeing as it was in the middle of a lake of acid and there was a gigantic gorilla sitting right next to it. But knowing that security spiders could be effectively kited, we all took turns swimming through the acid past the gorilla, who luckily didn't follow us into the acid, and then we would kite the security spiders out to the gorilla's island. The big guy would fight the security spiders, and it didn't matter if they weren't being stripped for parts as soon as they were down, because our new big dummy friend was strong enough to one-shot them once they got back up in their crippled state. As soon as one spider got kited, whoever did the kiting got some much-needed medical attention and got to take a nap in our little mobile base to recover, while the next person braved the acid lake to kite another spider drone until the whole place was empty out. We now took out the very weak King Gorilla because we didn't want to get wrecked by him on the way out, and his hides are worth a lot of money. After our success, we hit a few more science towers on the way back, and we used some of that grog that the townies had made with the extra wheat straw to finance the entire trip. So now, instead of just breaking even with the science, we now made a profit on our expedition, and money is starting to not become a problem anymore. Heck, we can take our new recruits we hire in bars and kit them out with the nicest gear their city has to offer, so they'll be slightly less useless when we go and fight things. Along the way, we've come across all sorts of other non-science related ruins, like little military bases and places that tell a story about what the world was like before whatever the heck happened this time around. Like there's one time we got lost in an area where these giant death lasers were firing off at random onto the ground, which is probably the worst place you could possibly get lost at. We also met a skeleton named Burn, who was there to see most of the world before it went into its most recent state of Armageddon. Burn's an odd skeleton fellow, but he's decent in a fight and knows a lot about everything around us. We even dropped off some of the science at home and picked up new sets of gear that let us brave the acid rain of the Deadlands, and made some more skeleton friends while we were out hunting for tech there. We've just about cleaned out all the science from towers and ruins now, and we can't get any more tech without starting a serious fight, but that's okay. We've moved up considerably in the world since first building some crappy walls in Holy Nation territory, and for the time being, we have enough science just to get by and focus on building the base up. And now it's time to take a moment to recognize our anti-sponsor, or in this case, our anti-sponsor. This video is brought to you today by the supreme benevolence of Beep, the little hiver that could. Beep is a hive drone that lives in the city of Mongrel, who I personally have no idea how he got there, as when you encounter him, he has no stats to speak of, and it's quite the dangerous trip to get into the city at the center of the Foglands. After hanging out for a bit in Mongrel, you'll eventually be approached by Beep, who will follow you around until you agree to accept him into your party. You should definitely take him in, as Beep is the most determined little hiver in all of Kenshi, and will stop at nothing to become the strongest warrior in all of the land. Not even Catlon or the Bugmaster can compare to a fully powered up Cyber Beep once he inevitably loses all of his frail little limbs in the midst of combat with low-level enemies. This doesn't slow him down though, as he'll just accept his new cybernetic limbs as the next evolution of himself, and refer to himself exclusively as Cyber Beep. Beep also has a ton of unique dialogue while you're traveling, and nothing, I mean nothing, can bring him down. Even if Beep dies in combat, you'll be overwhelmingly compelled to load to an earlier save no matter how much you went on about anti-save scumming Bushido or whatever stupid excuse you use to not have fun. You should always cherish Beep and have him in your party. Help him learn how to use a sword that's much too big for his little hiver arms, and then just give him a set of Masterwork grade KLR combat arms so he can lift a fragment axe over his head and through half a dozen Shek. Or just give him an Eagle's Cross crossbow so we can no-scope Holy Nation paladins from 100 yards out. That works too. Beep wants to be the strongest warrior so that there will be changes. He wants treasure and to meet beautiful women, beautiful human women, which he didn't even know were traveling with him all along, and some big Shek ladies too. Beep is possibly the only optimist in the world of Kenshi, and through training him, we can maybe make the world a better place. Beep and other perfect little cinnamon rolls of sentient beings are brought to you by patreon.com/charlatanwonder, where you can help me make these videos in these trying times, now that I have nothing better to do thanks to the mass shutdown causing me to be laid off from my job. Let's get back to the rest of the world of Kenshi now that we've introduced the best thing about it. So now we're at the point where we have the martial skill, the tech, and the resources to really start building up the base. Everyone back at home has their own standardized set of gear now, and if it's anything less than specialist grade, we chuck it into the parts recycler because we know we're better than that. We've also graduated from crossbows on our walls to having these sweet double barrel harpoon guns now. They even come with spotlights so that our guards don't take an accuracy penalty when we get raided at night. By the way, that's a thing in Kenshi. All skills take a penalty in the dark from harvesting crops to manning the guns. It's a good thing we have a crap load of windmills, battery banks, and backup generators to make sure that we have the juice at all times. We also had so much extra hemp from the cloth production that we started refining it into biofuel, which now we have more of that than we know what to do with too. The Black Dragon Ninjas and Dust Bandits have also been reduced to a relative annoyance now, as most of them can't even break down the gates before the poons get them. We've had a couple close calls lately though, so I think it's time we did something about them once and for all. I round up a posse of extra swords from the base camp, hire some mercenaries, and we head out to start cleaning up the border zone. The first to go were the Black Dragon Ninjas, who for a rather nasty bunch of raiders hardly lasted 5 minutes against us when we stormed their own tower. I guess they're like dragon types in Pokemon where their type of attack is super effective against themselves. Whatever. We bagged their leader, begrudgingly turned them into the Holy Nation for a bounty since they don't have a bounty anywhere else, and I haven't seen a single Black Dragon Genin anywhere since. Next to go were the Dust Bandits, who I have to admit were slightly better at defending themselves, but they get marks off for having literally no one manning their guns, despite their tower being able to clearly spot us from way out on our approach. We bag the Dust King and hand him over to the Shek Kingdom, but unfortunately this won't be the end of Dust Bandits, as they'll start splintering off into smaller factions and still attack us but in much smaller numbers. That leaves the splintered Dust Bandits faction and the Hungry Boys, who have been nothing more but a trail of bloody puddles leading up to a few yards short of my gate for a while now. I don't even stop to fight these guys when I'm traveling through the desert now, except for that one time when I just wanted to annihilate one of those 30-man herds of them as revenge for all the times they swarmed me when we were just starting out. With most of my enemies crushed and having nearly all the tech in the game, it was time for some serious expansion. But there was a problem. I had already hit my in-game limit of 30 characters per save. How was I supposed to have a dozen people manning the guns at all times, another dozen in the away team plus their pack animals, and 20 to 30 people needed to run my economy back at the base? Mods. That's how. I choose to run only a few mods for quality of life and to keep the content coming, and I opt out for stuff that gives you an edge or better gear because, well, it just doesn't feel right. Here's what I'm running in this playthrough. First order of business, 256 character limit mod. I'm pretty sure this is the most downloaded mod on the Steam page right now. The name says it all, and it's integral to making any big moves in the later game. And while I'm usually not into mods that make the game easier, and I'm sure the devs intended for you only to have 30 characters, but I'm gonna personally chalk this up to maybe this was more of an optimization thing, since while Kenshi isn't exactly a super graphically rich game, there's a whole lot of graphics to process, and everything is always happening even when you aren't viewing it, so to speak. Like, it certainly doesn't render it all out at once, and you'll frequently find yourself loading in chunks even if you're running on SSD, but things are still being calculated in real time, like where people are, what they're doing, and so on. Unique characters can die in attacks on the city they live in before you even get around to meeting them if you take too long. I've got a pretty good GPU and a whole lot of RAM on my PC, but it still chugs loading in new areas. But whatever. I want more dudes. I want a literal army. The next big thing that you're gonna want is a more reactive world mod, which allows for factions to make bigger moves once you're ready to make some moves yourself. While factions can and will take over cities of other factions with the right help and if the world state is correct, more reactive world creates a few more world states and contingency events, such as when you capture or kill the Dust King, rather than just ceasing to exist, the Dust Bandits will splinter off into smaller factions with the word dust in their name that are weaker, and the prime faction of cannibals will be divided into 12 tribes. I really like the part about the Dust Bandits because on top of splintering into new factions, they'll start living in all the ruins that used to be scattered around the Shek Kingdom and the Holy Nation, and you can now siege those bases. The Shek Kingdom can and will repopulate the hub too if you start crippling the Holy Nation's economy, in addition to their conquest of other cities you help them ransack. Also, the Holy Nation will form a resistance after you take down Blister Hill and will start using guerrilla tactics on your squad. There's a lot of other stuff in the world state, and a special character that spawns so that you can keep track of it all, and I'd recommend this as a nice stopgap between taking down lesser factions and going for the big boys like the Phoenix or Catlon. Other than that, I grabbed a few quality of life things, such as a fix for the Blood Spider's melee range, or an automated copper mine which for some reason isn't in the base game. Compressed textures are nice too, a better map and UI, and a mod that allows characters to repeat their unique dialogue after a while, because later in the game things will start getting really quiet unless you have it. There are also a few nice mods that just generally expand all the things that characters can say, which really livens up your squad traveling after the 100th hour or so. Okay, we've got all the mods installed and we've built our squad up, so let's do something big. Something that's a real test to see if we're ready for endgame aggression. Let's go fight that guy called the Bugmaster that everyone in the world seems to have a bounty on. I brought all my best dudes, and then I brought every mercenary I can find or hire because money was not an object here. The very approach to the Bugmaster's lair is a huge test of your team's fortitude. There are squads of like 20 or 30 skin spiders just wandering around, and there's enough of those squads to where if you time things poorly, the squads will intersect one another as you're fighting them, and you might have to deal with like so many of them that it crashes your game. The mercs didn't last long, even with me having my own squad give them medical attention between fights. But they did make for a nice distraction early on with all those skin spiders so that my own guys didn't get too badly crippled. So we finally get to what looks like it used to be an old science tower where the Bugmaster is posted up, and Jiminy Christmas, this guy is an absolute unit. Even with my entire squad and what's left of the mercenaries dogpiling the guy, we just barely got him down for long enough to stabilize his wounds so he wouldn't die on us on the way back to claim our reward and take that legendary tier weapon off his hands. And we still have to get out of the Bugmaster's domain in one piece now that all of his minions have gone aimless. The Bugmaster's treasure was really something else though. By the way, while all of this was going on, my base was under siege by the Holy Nation, who is now at war with me. This whole thing was some sort of season finale type stuff, as everything was popping off all at once all around the world and nowhere was safe from bloodshed. So why were the Holy Nation sending all these dudes after me? You might ask, as I normally keep a low profile. Well, it might have had something to do with me raiding a secret black site they have in order to acquire the last couple AI cores I needed to install these babies. 6-barrel rotating harpoon cannons. Despite the Holy Nation's dogmatic view on anything involving science, advancements in quality of life, or the rights of people other than Greenlander men, they keep a secret base at the edge of the Deadlands called Narco's Trap, which guards the evil tower. They say this is because they don't want anyone to commit heresy by learning about the sciences, but I think they just want this stuff for themselves. Well, I decided I could probably do better with those AI cores in their tower since I was further along the tech tree than they are. So I stormed their barracks and incapacitated all the soldiers stationed there. I say incapacitated because I'd like to believe that maybe one or two of them were able to survive my raid, and I even left some of them in their own cages where the wild animals wouldn't be able to eat their remains. Now, as a quick little sidebar here, this is the first time in an entire playthrough that I attacked a settlement that wasn't entirely evil or a bandit den. One of the things that I really like about Kenshi is that while it doesn't beat you over the head with it or make it obvious when it's happening, Kenshi has a lot of moral choices in it, and for once in a video game, it's hard and not instantly rewarding to be the good guy. Sure, I love the BioShock series, but in spite of the outset of, oh, it's gonna be so hard out there and you need all the Adam you can get, you objectively get more Adam from saving little sisters instead of harvesting the slug, because they'll give you a ton of Adam after every 3 girls. In Kenshi, it's hard to be the good guy from the outset. Recruiting team members of their own free will is always going to be far more expensive than just buying slaves in the slave markets. Selling contraband like hash, or even selling people you incapacitate into slavery, is a quick way to get really rich as opposed to making honest trade goods. And while I did make quite a bit money off of grog in the mid-game, that stuff is illegal in all of Kenshi as compared to hashish being very illegal in most of civilization. When I could, I chose to help people like the mercs I hired, even if that meant less medical supplies for my own guys. And on top of that, helping out guys doesn't really give you a major boost with the faction's reputation, although it will help get it back to 0 if you're in the negatives with them. I think it's that much rewarding to be the good guy in a game when it was actually hard to be the good guy, and not just a binary choice that gives you a big bonus no matter what you do. So it's at this point that you might have noticed that while your base initially started out as a little X on the map, which eventually became a storm house and then a little tower like it's an outpost, now your base has the same icon as a major city-state in the map, and let's be honest here, the base is now bigger than most of the major cities in the game, and we've got more industry than all of them do. We stopped bothering to produce grog or any other trade goods because our surplus weapons cost less resources to make and are worth far more than grog or any other trade good. We have to go through the entire Shek Kingdom and then through 3 or 4 hive villages just to offload our reject pile of anything less than Edgewalker Type 2 grade weapons, and there's no point of doing this because I already have 1 million Caton credits on hand, not to mention that the base is now likely a net worth of the tens of millions of cats because of the property value, all the high grade armor I've got all my boys equipped with, on top of everything else we make, the crap loads of food and high-end materials that I've just got laying around now. And I'm pretty sure at this point I am richer than the Merchants Guild or the United Cities. Some people still try to raid me, but not even the Holy Nation's kill squads make it past the gate. Well, they did this one time when the AI glitched out and didn't open fire on the paladins trying to kick down our door while the Bugmaster was attacking, but upon reloading a save, the guys went down in less than 30 seconds. Now, most of the time I learned about my base getting assaulted by getting a notification that the raid has been defeated and then seeing a pile of bodies in front of my gates. Enemy attacks have started going so poorly for the other guys that I had to build a new corpse furnace right outside my front gate, in one part as a warning to attackers that they aren't going to get very far, but mainly because now I have not 1 but 2 people on corpse disposal duty, but even then they can't keep up with the amount of bodies hitting the floor, and by the time they're done with the last few guys of the first raid, another raid is already starting. You would think that the perpetual trail of blood leading up to my base that stops just short of the literal corpse grinder would be enough of a warning that the 12 dudes stationed at my walls, each manning 6-barrel rotating harpoon cannons, are going to make very short work of any invaders that try anything on me. Those things can easily pierce armor, and the first volley does enough damage to wipe out most invasion forces. Nothing has ever completely depleted all of my cannons, requiring my guys to reload, but the challengers of the undefeated have came close. It's at this point that you're likely going to become a fully fledged ally to a nation of your choosing, likely when you turn in the bounty on the Bugmaster, as it will instantly max your relations with whatever faction you give him up to. I went with the Shek Kingdom as they were always cool to me, save for the occasional trash talk, and the Empress Asada the Stone Golem literally gave me her firstborn, Seta. She's a bit of a slowpoke, but she'll be fine after a bit. A side effect of giving up the Bugmaster to the faction of your choice is that any faction that doesn't like them is now on not so friendly terms with you, or outright hostile if you've already pissed them off. I've thought, whatever. You know what? The Holy Nation was always sending goons after me anyway after our little incident in Narco's Trap, so I may as well align myself with to float some ninjas too and start dismantling their empire. So here I am, having a great time raiding all the Holy Nation mines and farms, incapacitating or outright killing all the guards, and putting the survivors in cages that the slaves usually go into while freeing the slaves. Some slaves were too scared to taste the freedom, but others were with it and got out of there, and a few of those even joined up with me. They're sitting now on training dummies at my base, waiting for something to happen because my kill squad is pretty full as it is. Nothing was really happening to the Holy Nation as a whole though, so maybe it takes a little time for that crippled economy to set in, or perhaps I need to take out more farms. Screw that, let's go sack a city. I load up my pack beast with extra ammo and medicine, and we head right out to the city of Stack. Lucky for me, it would seem that their mounted crossbowmen at the gates aren't very skilled at using those things, because my guys with sniper crossbows can take them out well outside of their range that they can shoot back at me, effectively softening up their defenses before we charge in. We basically flatten most of the guards that are still at the gate and start clearing out buildings. There's a few things that we can't quite take yet though. We took a little break and came back, and now we take out the boss, the High Inquisitor, which seems to be a magic switch now, as once we grabbed him and took him in for a bounty, the city had gone from red to green and now it was owned by the Shek Kingdom. So I guess, yay, we're conquesting? The Shek had also officially claimed the hub thanks to that mod I installed, so now there's an actual police force and societal order in the starting town. The shinobi are still there, but they never really did anything unless one of their own guys got attacked. I decide that just for the heck of it, I'm gonna buy literally every building in the hub and then use my massive amount of unused resources and money to repair every building in the city. I leave them open to the public because what the heck am I gonna do with 20 new buildings that are about 2 miles away from my base proper? So I have effectively given everyone in the hub free and safe housing. Maybe I'll build some shops or something in one of them to help get rid of all this extra food and materials I have laying around, since I'm now at the point where I make more food than I'm able to eat or even store. I'll do that later though. There's countries to dismantle. So believe it or not, after 120 hours in this playthrough, I'm nowhere near done with all the things I can do, and this isn't even counting the entirely different paths I could have taken early on. For instance, starting as a merchant would have likely been an entirely different game since I'd be aligned to the Merchant Guild, and that would have made me much more likely to start exploring the United Cities instead of the Shek Kingdom. Or if I had taken the rock bottom path, making the Holy Nation a no-go zone from the very start, because it's highly likely that I'd eventually scrounge up enough money to afford a cybernetic limb replacement, which makes you attack on sight for them. Not a good thing for early game people. I could have chosen to intentionally keep my squad small or even tried being a true lone wanderer just to see how far I could have gotten. I've presently had to stop myself from playing more because there's other games I need to play in order to get ready for this year's Halloween in July event, which is gonna be a big one this year. I have no idea if I'm gonna be putting out anything in June, but stay tuned, I'll figure out something. And I'm nowhere done with this playthrough either. I'm still systematically taking out the heads of the Holy Nation so that I can move on Blister Hill when there's little chance of reorganization once the Phoenix is put in a cell. Then when I'm done with that, I'm gonna go back to those anti-slaver guys I met before who were like, "You're not cool enough to hang out with us because no slave-owning nations hate you." And I'm gonna be like, yo, I completely dismantle a slave-holding nation. Get behind me, Tin Fist. And then we'll go dismantle the slave trade in the United Cities, and maybe the United Cities themselves if they don't want to get along with the new free world I'm making. After that, I think I'll leave the hives alone, as they never really did anything to me so long as I stayed out of the Southern Hive's territory. And they seem to be okay. Then, when I'm sure that all the men, women, and hivers are free in Kenshi, and my army is strong enough for anything, there's one last place I need to go and one last wrong to right. Who knows how long that's gonna take me though. If you haven't gotten the idea already, the world of Kenshi is huge, and there's a ton of things to explore and experience. We haven't even really touched on things like encountering the skin bandits, all the various little cult factions, exploring the fringes of the world like the Iron Tail, or anywhere where the Leviathans live. Seriously, this video could probably go on for another hour, and I hear you can even make yourself an army of crabs. Can you imagine being some bandit camp that's harassing travelers, and suddenly in the dead of night night, you hear the skitter of 100 crabs the size of horses charging down your camp. This current playthrough is just over a year old in in-game time, and there's more I can do even before I start adding in new story mods, and odds are, if you decide to pick up Kenshi for yourself after this, your experience is going to be entirely different from mine. Seriously though, it's worth every penny. Alrighty everyone, that's gonna do it for this video. Okron knows it could have gone on for a whole lot longer, but at this point you just gotta go out and experience the brutality and adventure in Kenshi for yourself. Special shoutouts to $10 patrons Elisa Nera, Deadnegator, Karlski, Chili Moonbuns, OMG Ponies, McFluffers, and French Toast. And a last minute hello and welcome to new $10 patron Jacob Maria. Thanks for joining. I'd love for all of you to at least swing by my Patreon where I've got updates about video progress, outlines of videos to come in the future, and for all the patrons, exclusive videos and sneak peeks at the upcoming events. Even $1 gets you access to all the good stuff. Also feel free to come and say hi on the Discord, where we're all trying to find new and interesting ways to distract ourselves, and I think I'm going to start up doing community game night on Sundays, so that ought to be good for a bit of entertainment. I honestly don't know when the next video is going to be since I'm already in full swing for preparing the Halloween in July event, which I intend to be bigger and better than the last one like I previously said. But I might find time to make sure you all know I'm alive in June. Let me know in the comments if there are any games you'd like to see me talk about, and I might just look into them because hell, I've got the time. So in the meantime, remember to stay inside, wash your hands, stay safe, and enjoy this cat video. Oh, Frisk, what is this? What is this? What is this? There's an intruder. It's Orange Boy. Oh, he's already gone. Did you stare at him enough? Did you make him go away? Oh yeah, I think he's left the premises. Little backstory on this. Orange Boy seems to be the Tom in the neighborhood. He runs around screaming to mark his territory and also spraying to mark his territory by other means. And it frustrates Frisk because he can't go outside yet. We got him. Where is it? Frisk, hold still. The harness. And it even fits him. But because his animal hospital is currently not doing flea treatments and vaccination updates because essential services only, Frisk can't go outside. He can't defend his territory from Orange Boy. No, let's be real here. Orange Boy would kick your butt. You've never been in a fight in your life. You can't hide from the truth.